Asterisk asterisk. The wind howled outside the small wooden cabin. Carrying the icy bite of the frontier night, Ethan Cole sat by the dim fire, mending a torn jacket, his rifle leaning against the wall. It was a quiet night, too quiet, and he could hear the creak of the old timbers as the cold pressed in. Life on this remote colony planet was lonely, but he had chosen it to escape the noise of crowded human cities. Then it came, the knock, not a polite tap, but a desperate pounding, fast and urgent. Ethan froze, hand tightening around his sewing needle. Nobody visited this far from the settlement. Not at night. He reached for his rifle and stood, the firelight throwing his shadow long across the floor. Another knock, louder this time, almost shaking the door, and then a voice soft but strained calling out in accented English, "Human, please, help me." Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle. He moved cautiously, boots crunching on the wooden floorboards. When he opened the door, the cold rushed in like a living thing, biting at his face, and standing there was a woman. No, not human. She was tall and slender, with skin like pale silver under the moonlight, her hair long and dark, shimmering as if made of fine strands of metal. Her large eyes were a deep violet, glowing faintly in the dark. She clutched two small figures close to her sides, children, their faces buried in her cloak. She breathed heavily, her voice trembling. "I need a place. My children. We are in danger." Ethan's heart pounded. He glanced past her into the darkness, half expecting to see shadows moving between the trees. "What kind of danger?" he asked, his voice low. She swallowed hard, her gaze flicking to the forest behind her. "They killed my mate," she said softly. "Raiders. They will come for us next." The children clung to her legs, their small hands gripping the fabric tightly. They were shivering, and not just from the cold. Ethan knew he should be careful. Strangers could bring trouble, especially alien strangers. But something in her eyes made him pause. A mix of fear, exhaustion, and something else, desperation. "What's your name?" Ethan asked cautiously. "Saria," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "These are my children, Leary and Tovin." She hesitated, then took a deep breath, her next words coming slowly, as if each one cost her something. "In my people's way, a widow must find a protector quickly, or others will claim her. Take her children." Her eyes locked with his. "Human, I will warm your bed." "My children need a father." Ethan felt the words hit him like a shock. Not because of the offer, but because of the raw honesty behind it. She wasn't trying to seduce him. This was a plea for survival. The cold wind whipped between them, carrying the distant sound of something moving in the forest. It could have been an animal, or it could have been exactly what she feared. He looked at her, really looked, and saw how her cloak was torn, how her hands shook not from the cold, but from exhaustion. The children's clothes were thin and damp, their small faces pale. He could turn her away, close the door, and keep his life quiet and safe, or he could let her in and step into a storm far bigger than the one outside. Another noise from the dark branches snapping. Saria stiffened, her grip on the children tightening. Ethan made his choice. "Get inside," he said firmly, stepping back to let them in. She hesitated only a second before ushering the children through the doorway, her eyes scanning the darkness one last time. Ethan shut the door and bolted it. The warmth of the fire reached toward them, but the air still carried the chill of fear. The children huddled near the hearth, their small eyes darting around the cabin. Saria stood near the door, her shoulders tense as if ready to run again. Ethan set his rifle on the table but kept it close. "You can stay for the night," he said. "We'll figure the rest out in the morning." She nodded, her eyes softening just slightly. "Thank you, human," she whispered. Ethan tried to return to his seat, but his mind kept replaying her words. "I will warm your bed. My children need a father." They weren't just words, they were a lifeline thrown in the dark, and somewhere deep inside, he knew the night was far from over. Asterisk. The fire crackled softly. but the warmth did little to chase away the tension in the cabin. Ethan sat in his chair, rifle leaning close, eyes fixed on the alien woman and her children. Saria sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a wooden cup of hot water. The children had curled up near the fire, already drifting into uneasy sleep. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the faint rustle of unseen movement. Every so often, Ethan's gaze would shift toward the door, listening for anything that didn't belong. He knew she had not told him everything, not yet. The way her eyes kept flicking to the window, the way her shoulders stayed tense, spoke of danger close at hand. "You said raiders," Ethan began, his voice low. "How many?" Saria hesitated, her fingers tightening on the cup. "Too many for one human," she said finally. "They travel in packs. 10, 20, sometimes more." Ethan frowned. "That's not raiders," he said. "That's an army." She gave a faint nod, her gaze fixed on the flames. "They are not soldiers. They are worse," she murmured. "They take what they want. People, food, shelter, lives." Her voice trembled slightly, and Ethan could see the weight of memory in her eyes. "They came to our farm 2 nights ago. My mate fought. They killed him," she whispered. "I ran. I hid the children. We walked until our legs gave out." Ethan leaned forward. "And now you're here." Her violet eyes met his, steady now. "Yes. Because I know how humans protect what is theirs," she said, her tone shifting from sorrow to resolve. "In my culture, if a widow finds a protector, he becomes her shield, her mate, the father to her children." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "I think you're asking me for more than shelter," he said carefully. "I am asking you to keep us alive." She replied without hesitation. "If I belong to you, the raiders cannot claim me. They will think twice before they try." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Ethan had faced danger before: wild beasts, blizzards, the occasional bandit. But this was different. This was inviting trouble into his home and daring it to come closer. He rubbed the back of his neck. "You realize," he said slowly, "if they come here, I can't promise we'll all walk away." Her expression softened, but her voice was steady. "If we stay out there, I can promise you, we won't." A log in the fire popped, sending sparks into the air. Ethan's eyes drifted to the children, their small bodies rising and falling with shallow breaths. They were young, too young to face the kind of fear Saria spoke of. He had lived on this frontier long enough to know what happened to the weak when predators found them. Maybe she was right. Maybe the only way to keep them safe was to make them his problem. Still, the thought of claiming her as a mate made him uneasy. This wasn't about love, not yet. It was survival wrapped in tradition. And survival on the frontier was a language Ethan understood. Suddenly, a faint noise outside made both their heads turn. It wasn't the wind. This was heavier, deliberate. Footsteps. Saria's eyes widened, her body going rigid. "They've found us," she whispered. Ethan stood, grabbing his rifle and moving to the window. The night outside was pitch black, but he caught movement, a shadow slipping between trees. 2, 3, maybe more. They weren't coming in fast, but they were watching, circling. He turned back to Saria. "You said they travel in packs. How far behind are the rest?" She shook her head. "If these are scouts, the rest could be here by morning." Ethan's mind raced. He could send her and the children back out into the night, hope they led the danger away from his cabin. Or he could dig in, prepare for whatever came, and hope his walls held. The choice was already made the moment he opened his door. "Get the children under the table," he ordered. "If they break in, I want them out of sight." Saria obeyed. Without question, gently shaking the children awake and guiding them to the corner, Ethan moved to the small shelf by the wall, pulling down extra ammunition. The knock at the door was soft at first, almost polite. Then it grew louder. 3 heavy thuds that rattled the frame. "Human," a deep growling voice called from outside. "You have something that belongs to us." Ethan kept his rifle raised, eyes locked on the door. "She's not yours," he called back. The voice laughed a low, cold sound. "She will be. When we take her from your bones." Saria's breath caught, and Ethan could see the fear in her eyes, but he also saw something else. Trust. She believed he would stand between her and whatever waited outside. And in that moment, Ethan knew he would, no matter the cost. The cabin was silent, except for the wind outside. The children crouched under the table, their eyes wide, their small bodies pressed together for comfort. Saria knelt beside them, one arm wrapped around both, whispering in a language Ethan didn't understand. Her voice was calm, but Ethan could see the tension in her every movement. He stood by the window, rifle in hand, watching the tree line. The shadows had moved back, melting into the dark. The raiders had not attacked. Not yet. Instead, they were waiting, testing him. Ethan had seen this before, predators circling before the strike. Minutes felt like hours. His ears caught every sound, the creak of the cabin walls, the snap of branches outside, the faint whistle of the wind through the chimney. Finally, the night seemed to grow still again. No more footsteps, no more voices, but Ethan knew they hadn't gone far. He lowered his rifle slightly and turned to Saria. "They're not coming tonight," he said, "but they'll be back." Saria's eyes met his, serious and unblinking. "They always come back," she replied. He moved to the fireplace, throwing another log onto the flames. The warmth spread slowly through the cabin, and the children's shivering eased. Saria guided them closer to the fire, unwrapping their thin cloaks. Underneath, their clothes were worn and torn, small tears in the fabric showing pale skin beneath. Ethan frowned, realizing how far they must have traveled in this cold. He poured water into a small pot and set it to heat over the fire. From a wooden crate, he took out a bundle of dried meat and root vegetables. It wasn't much, but it would be food in their stomachs. Saria watched him work, her expression unreadable. "You live here alone?" she said softly. "Yes," replied. "I like the quiet." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment before shifting to her children. "They are not used to quiet," she said, "since their father. There has only been running." The children's heads lowered at her words. Ethan didn't press for details. He could hear enough in her voice to know the story was a painful one. When the stew was ready, Ethan ladled it into wooden bowls. The smell filled the cabin, warm and rich. The children ate slowly at first, glancing at their mother as if waiting for permission. Saria gave them a small nod, and they began to eat faster, hunger winning over caution. Ethan sat across from them, his eyes moving between the window and the fire. "You said earlier about being my protector," he began. Saria's eyes met his again, steady and calm now. "Yes," she said simply. "That's not how humans work," Ethan said. "We don't claim people like that." Her brow furrowed. "In my culture, it is not claiming," she said. "It is binding. An agreement. You protect us, and we become yours." Ethan leaned back, the words sinking in. "It still sounds like trouble," he said. Her lips curved just slightly, not quite a smile. "Life is trouble," she replied, after the children finished eating. Saria helped them lie down near the fire, covering them with blankets Ethan had pulled from a chest. The flickering light made their silver-toned skin gleam softly. They were asleep within minutes, breathing slow, and even Ethan returned to his chair, still holding his rifle loosely across his lap. For a long time, they sat in silence. Saria's gaze followed the flames, but Ethan noticed her eyes flicking toward him now and then. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quiet. "I know what you are thinking," she said. "You think I bring danger to your door. And you are right." Ethan didn't respond immediately. "You didn't have a choice," he said after a moment. "But now, neither do I." Her head tilted slightly. "Because you opened the door," she said. He nodded. "Once you let someone in, you see them. And once you see them, you can't pretend they're not there." The fire burned low, and Ethan rose to add more wood. The room brightened again, shadows dancing across the walls. Saria shifted, drawing her knees closer to her chest. "You should sleep," Ethan said. "I'll keep watch." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Wake me if they come," she murmured. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You planning to fight too?" "Yes," she said simply. "If I must." She lay down near her children, one arm resting over them protectively. Her breathing slowed, and soon she was asleep. Ethan sat by the fire, eyes drifting between the door and the sleeping figures. On the floor, the cabin felt different now, not just his anymore. It was a shelter for 3 more souls, and whether he liked it or not, their lives were now tangled with his, sometime in the deep hours of the night. He heard it again, not the pounding knock from before, but the soft crunch of footsteps in snow. He rose slowly, moving to the window. The forest was quiet, shadows deep under the moonlight, and then a flicker of movement, a figure slipping between trees, watching. Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. They were still out there, and the first night was far from over. The morning came cold and gray. Frost clung to the edges of the window, and the forest outside seemed too still. Ethan stood at the door, watching the tree line with narrowed eyes. Saria was already awake, quietly tending to her children, making sure they ate the small portion of food he had given them. "Do you think they're gone?" she asked without looking up. "No," Ethan replied. "Predators don't leave just because the sun came up." He had spent the night thinking, if the raiders came in force, his cabin walls wouldn't hold forever. He had ammunition, yes, and a few traps outside, but he was only one man still. He wasn't about to hand her over, not after what he'd seen in her eyes the night before. Around mid-morning, the silence broke. A distant howl rolled through the trees, not an animal, but a signal. Ethan felt the hair on his neck rise. Saria stiffened instantly, pulling her children closer. "They are calling each other," she whispered. "They are coming." Ethan grabbed his rifle and moved to the small supply chest in the corner. He took out a second weapon, a short-barreled shotgun, and set it by the table. Then he checked the door latch and the wooden shutters. On the windows, Saria watched him, her face pale but steady. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Keep the kids under the bed," he said. "If anything happens, you take them through the trapdoor into the cellar." She nodded once. No argument. The children didn't understand, but they obeyed when she guided them toward the sleeping area. Ethan positioned himself by the front window, eyes scanning the forest. At first, he saw nothing but the shifting shadows of the trees. Then they emerged, figures moving low and fast, their armor mismatched and painted in dark streaks. There were at least 7 at first. They spread out in a half circle, slowly closing in. One of them stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered, carrying a long blade on his back. His face was hidden by a metal mask with jagged teeth carved into it. "Human," the leader called, his voice rough and mocking. "You have our prize. Send her out, and we will let you live." Ethan didn't move from the window. "She's not yours," he said. The raider laughed, shaking his head. "Everything here is ours," he growled. "The woman, the children, even your bones." Ethan's finger tightened slightly on the rifle's trigger. "You can try," he said. The leader tilted his head, then made a sharp gesture. The others began to fan out, moving toward the sides of the cabin. Ethan cursed. Under his breath, he fired the first shot through the window, the bullet striking the ground inches from one raider's foot. The message was clear. He wasn't bluffing. The group froze for a moment, then scattered into the trees. Ethan ducked back from the window, knowing they'd try to flank him. The next sound came from the side of the cabin, a heavy thud against the wall. Ethan rushed to that side and fired again, the blast tearing through the wood and into the space outside. A pained cry followed, then silence. He reloaded quickly, his hands steady despite the pounding in his chest. From the other side, another raider tried to pry open the shutter. Ethan swung the shotgun toward the noise and fired, splinters flying. The shutter slammed back into place. Through the chaos, Saria stayed crouched with her children, whispering to keep them calm. Her eyes followed Ethan's every move. As if memorizing the way he fought, the leader's voice came again, closer this time. "You can't kill us all. Human," he taunted. "Give her to me, and I will make your death quick." Ethan stepped to the doorway and shouted back, "Come!" "And take her." For a few tense seconds, there was only silence. Then another howl split the air. Answered by more in the distance, Saria's face went tight with fear. "That means more are coming," she said. "The rest of their pack." Ethan glanced at the forest, counting in his head. If they came in full force, he wouldn't be able to hold them off for long. He had to make them think he was more dangerous than he really was. He pulled a small flare from the shelf and lit it, tossing it into the snow. Outside, the bright red light flared against the white ground, making it hard for the raiders to hide in the shadows. Then he fired another shot into the air, the sound echoing through the forest. Sometimes noise was as much a weapon as bullets. For a while, it worked. The shapes in the trees retreated, melting into the dark edges of the forest again. But Ethan knew it wasn't over. Saria moved to his side, her voice low. "They will come back with more," she said. "I know," he replied. "That's why we're not waiting for them." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "We're going to make this place a fortress," Ethan said, his jaw set. "Before the sun sets, I want traps, barricades, and a plan." Outside, the snow began to fall harder, soft flakes drifting down over the ground. It was quiet again. But Ethan could feel the weight of the danger still hanging over them. This was only the first fight. The real one was coming. The snow had stopped falling by midday. The forest stood silent again. But Ethan knew silence didn't mean safety. It meant the raiders were regrouping, planning their next move. If they wanted to survive the next attack, the cabin had to become more than a shelter. It had to become a fortress. Ethan stepped outside, scanning the ground for tracks. The snow showed the trail where the raiders had come and gone, their boot prints deep and heavy. He followed them for a short distance, just far enough to confirm they'd pulled back into the woods. Then he returned to the cabin, already making a list in his head. Inside, Saria was sitting with her children by the fire, teaching them something in her language. They laughed softly, a rare sound in the past day, and for a moment, Ethan almost forgot the danger outside. But the moment passed quickly. "We need to get to work," he said. Saria looked up, nodding without question. Ethan handed her a small axe. "I'll show you how to split the wood," he said, her silver-toned fingers curled around the handle, and she followed him outside. The cold bit at their faces, but they worked steadily, breaking logs into sharp stakes. Ethan explained how the stakes could be driven into the snow around the cabin to slow anyone trying to rush in. Saria listened carefully, copying his movements, until her strikes were clean and strong. The children helped in their own way, carrying smaller pieces of wood and stacking them near the walls. Leary, the older one, asked a question in her own tongue, and Saria translated. "She wants to know if these sticks will really stop bad men." Ethan crouched to her level. "They'll make it harder for them to get close," he said, "and that gives us time to fight back." Leary nodded solemnly and went back to work. They spent the afternoon setting the stakes, hammering them into the frozen ground in a jagged circle around the cabin. Ethan also rigged a few traps using wire, scrap metal, and old bear snares he'd kept from his hunting days. Saria followed his instructions without complaint, her movements quick and precise. It struck Ethan that she wasn't just willing to fight, she was preparing to when the sun dipped lower. They returned inside to warm up. Saria helped prepare a simple meal from the last of the dried meat. The children sat close to Ethan while he cleaned his rifle, their wide eyes following every motion. "You do this every day?" Tovin asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "If you want a weapon to protect you, you have to take care of it," he said. The boy seemed to think about that for a moment, before nodding slowly. As the meal cooked, Ethan and Saria talked more. She told him about her home before the raiders' fields of tall silver grass that shimmered under the suns. Her people were farmers, not fighters. But when the raids began, every family had to choose stay and fight. Or run. Her mate had chosen to fight, and it had cost him his life. Ethan listened without interrupting. He understood loss, even if his had been different, a long time ago. He had come to this frontier to escape a war. He had built the cabin with his own hands, swearing he'd never be pulled into another fight. But now, here he was again, after they ate. Ethan showed Saria how to use the shotgun. Her grip was awkward at first, but she adjusted quickly. When she fired the first practice, shot into the snow outside. The sound echoed through the trees. Ethan noticed the way her shoulders squared, the way she seemed taller afterward. "You're a quick learner," he said. She gave a faint smile. "My children will not lose me," she replied. That night, they all sat by the fire together. The children dozed off leaning against Saria's side. Ethan sat across from them, his rifle resting nearby. There was still a tension in the air, but it felt different now, less helpless. "More ready. You've done a lot for us," Saria said quietly once the children were asleep. Ethan shook his head. "Just doing what needs to be done." "In my culture," she said, "when someone fights for you before they even know you, that is the beginning of a bond." Ethan didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure what to call what they were building here. A home? A defense? Something more? But as he looked around the cabin, at the reinforced windows, the stakes outside, the sleeping children, he realized something. This wasn't just his home anymore. It was theirs, somewhere deep in the forest. A howl broke the stillness of the night. Saria's eyes met his, and no words were needed. They both knew the raiders hadn't given up, but now they would be ready. The next morning began with silence. No wind, no bird calls, not even the creak of trees. Ethan knew that kind of silence. It meant something was moving out there. Something that wanted to be heard only when it was too late. He stepped outside, rifle in hand, scanning the forest. The snow was fresh from the night, but already marked by tracks, dozens of them, leading toward the cabin from different directions. Saria appeared at the doorway, the shotgun resting against her shoulder. "They're here," she said quietly. He nodded once, his jaw tightening. They had spent the last 2 days reinforcing the cabin. Wooden stakes now jutted from the ground. In sharp angles, the windows were barricaded with thick planks, and wire traps had been set in a wide circle. It wasn't perfect, but it might buy them time. The first howl came from the west, deep and long. It was answered by another from the north, then another from the south. "They're surrounding us," Ethan muttered. Saria moved the children toward the trapdoor leading to the cellar. "Stay quiet, no matter what," she told them, her voice calm but firm. The children nodded, fear in their wide eyes, but they obeyed without question. Disappearing into the dark below, the snow began to crunch under heavy boots. Figures emerged from the trees, more than before, at least 15, maybe 20. They moved with confidence, their weapons glinting in the pale morning light. The leader, the same masked raider from before. "Step forward, this is the end human," he called out. "We take what we want, and we will take everything." Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he raised his rifle and fired, the shot striking the ground just inches from the leader's foot. The raider didn't flinch, but the rest of his pack slowed their advance. Saria moved to the other window, keeping her shotgun ready. The first raider tried to rush the cabin, but his leg was caught in one of the wire traps. He fell hard into the snow, yelling in pain. Ethan fired again, dropping him where he lay. That broke the tension. The rest charged forward, shouting, their boots pounding against the snow. Ethan moved between the windows, firing in quick bursts. Saria did the same, her shots ringing loud in the cold air. 2 raiders fell. Another stumbled into the wooden stakes and went down screaming, but still, they kept coming. One reached the cabin wall and began hacking at it with a blade. Ethan grabbed the shotgun from beside the door, threw it open, and fired point blank. The blast sent the raider sprawling back into the snow. The leader was still standing, watching. Waiting, Ethan realized he was letting the others test the defenses first. Smart, he thought, too smart. From the back of the cabin came a heavy crash, the sound of wood breaking. 2 raiders had climbed onto the roof and dropped down to the rear, smashing through part of the barricade. Saria spun and fired, catching one in the shoulder. The other lunged toward her, but Ethan tackled him. The 2 of them crashing into the wall. The raider swung a blade, grazing Ethan's arm. Ethan gritted his teeth, grabbed the man's wrist, and slammed him into the floor, ending the fight. With a sharp blow from the rifle stock, they barely had time to catch their breath before more raiders poured in through the broken section. The cabin filled with the sounds of boots, shouts, and gunfire. Saria fought like someone who had already lost too much fast. Fierce, and without hesitation, Ethan moved beside her, the 2 of them covering each other without needing words. But numbers were against them. A heavy blow from behind sent Ethan stumbling. His back hitting the wall hard, the leader stepped into the room, his masked face turning toward Saria. "You could have been mine," he growled. "But now you'll watch him die." Ethan's vision blurred for a moment, but the sound of Saria's sharp cry pulled him back. He pushed himself off the wall, charged forward, and slammed into the leader. The 2 crashed through the half-broken door into the snow outside. The cold air burned Ethan's lungs as they rolled, fists and blades clashing in a brutal fight. The leader was strong, his blows heavy, but Ethan fought with something deeper. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the woman and children inside, for the home they had built together in just a few short days. With a roar, Ethan drove his shoulder into the raider's chest. Knocking him off balance, in the next breath, he raised his rifle and fired. The leader fell back into the snow. Still, the remaining raiders, seeing their leader dead, hesitated. Saria appeared in the doorway. Shotgun aimed. "Leave now," she shouted, her voice carrying over the wind. "Or you will all join him." One by one, the raiders backed away, retreating into the trees. The sound of their boots faded until only the wind remained. Ethan stood there, chest heaving, blood seeping from a cut on his arm. Saria rushed to his side, her eyes scanning him for wounds. "You're hurt," she said. "I'm alive," he replied, his voice rough. They stood together in the snow, the cabin behind them battered but still standing. The fight was over for now. The snow was red in patches where the fight had been. The cold air bit at Ethan's face as he stood in front of the cabin. Breathing hard, Saria was beside him, her silver hair tangled from the struggle, her eyes still sharp and alert. The forest was quiet again, but this time it felt different. The raiders were gone, at least for now. They stepped back inside the cabin, closing the door and sliding the heavy bolt into place. The fire had burned low, but its warmth wrapped around them. Like a blanket, from the trapdoor, the children's voices called out, "Is it over?" Leary's voice trembled. "It's over," Saria answered, her tone softer than it had been in days. The children scrambled out of the cellar and ran to her. Hugging her tightly, Ethan watched quietly, the sight stirring something deep in his chest. He sat down heavily in his chair, setting his rifle against the wall. The adrenaline was fading now, and with it came the ache in his arm and ribs. Saria noticed and knelt beside him, gently pushing up his sleeve. The cut on his arm was deep but clean. "You need this wrapped," she said, already pulling a strip of cloth from her bag. Ethan gave a small shrug. "I've had worse. But this one, you got for us," she said firmly, meeting his eyes. Her touch was careful as she tied the bandage, but there was no hesitation. The children sat close to the fire, whispering to each other in their own language. Every now and then, their eyes would drift to Ethan, and they would smile shyly. Saria followed their gaze and then looked back at him. "They see you now," she said quietly. "How?" he asked. "As part of us," she replied, "in my people's way. A man who fights for a widow and her children is no longer a stranger, he is family." Ethan leaned back in the chair, letting her words settle. He hadn't thought about family In years, it was something he'd left behind long ago when he chose this quiet, lonely life, but now, the cabin didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt alive that night. They all ate together. The children laughed more freely than before. Saria even told a story from her home world, about a brave hunter who protected his village from shadow beasts. Her voice was warm, her eyes bright as she spoke. Ethan listened, watching the way the firelight danced in her hair after the children went to sleep. Ethan stepped outside for some air. The moon was high, silver light spilling over the snow. The forest stretched endless and dark, but it didn't feel quite as threatening. Footsteps crunched behind him. Saria had followed. "You should rest," she said. "I will," he replied. "I just needed a moment." She stood beside him in the cold, silent for a while. Then she spoke softly. "I meant what I said, human. You are part of us now." Ethan glanced at her. "You sure about that?" "I'm not exactly the family type." Saria's lips curved into a faint smile. "You are exactly the family type, whether you see it yet or not." They went back inside, closing the door against the night. Ethan lay on his bed for the first time in days, but he didn't feel the same emptiness as before. Saria slept near the fire with her children, their forms curled together under the blankets. The sound of their breathing filled the room, steady and peaceful. In the days that followed, they repaired the damage to the cabin. The barricades stayed in place, but the atmosphere inside began to change. The work was no longer just survival, it was building something together. Saria cooked meals from the supplies Ethan had, teaching him how to prepare some of her people's dishes with what they could find. The children followed Ethan outside, learning how to stack wood, check traps, and even handle a slingshot. One afternoon, while the snow fell lightly, Tovin handed Ethan a small figure carved from wood. "It's you," the boy said shyly. Ethan took it and saw the rough shape of a man holding a rifle. He smiled despite himself. "Not bad," he said. Tovin's grin widened before he ran back to his sister. That night, as they sat by the fire, Saria leaned toward him. "You know," she said, "when I knocked on your door, I thought you might turn us away." "I thought about it," Ethan admitted. "And now?" she asked, her voice gentle. He looked at her, then at the children asleep nearby. "Now I can't imagine this place without you," he said. Saria's eyes softened, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked truly at ease. The fire crackled, the wind whispered against the walls, and the world outside felt far away. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Not as strangers, not as a human and an alien forced into survival, but as a family,